Greetings to everyone. Today is an exciting day to which I am beyond thrilled to be a part of. This interview is taking place as part of the 12th gathering of the ParlAmericas Parliamentary Network for Gender Equality, which is being held as an online series this year for parliamentarians in the Americas and the Caribbean. And this year's gathering is focused on designing inclusive futures in partnership with youth. My name is Ashlee Burnett. I currently serve as the chair of the Caribbean Women in Leadership Trinidad and Tobago National Chapter. I am the founder of Feminine, an intersectional Caribbean feminist organization that uses social good, conversation, and education to advance gender equality in the Caribbean. And I'm a part of the class of 2020, Women Deliver Young Leaders. Today, I have the utmost pleasure to speak with the Honourable Dr. Jean Augustine, Grenadian-Canadian former parliamentarian, the first Black woman to be elected to the Canadian House of Commons, social justice advocate, educational administrator. Dr. Augustine has many achievements and honors, including leading the motion that created Black History Month in Canada. She established the Jean Augustine Center for Young Women's Empowerment, which is committed to building the self-esteem and self-worth of young women and girls ages 7 to 17 years old by positively influencing them and their outlook on life. Happy belated birthday, Dr. Augustine. How are you?
Well, thank you so much. I'm so very pleased to be talking to you in the Caribbean. Wish I were there. But anyway, I am also a proud Grenadian. And I think you mentioned that you were Trinidadian, and I think that I say to my friends here, and I really get them going when I say, every Trinidadian is a Grenadian, you know. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you to the parliamentary group, because I think ParlAmericas have been doing this excellent work of reaching hands across the Caribbean, keeping that presence and that knowledge flow between our community, our parliamentary communities, and the Canada. And it's such a great thing to do, because it is, I ask the question sometimes, where were all these groups when I was coming up?
I feel that, and I actually benefited from ParlAmericas earlier on this year in partnership with CWIL, Caribbean Women Leadership. They conducted this program called YWIL, Young Women in Leadership. Yes. And we actually got to sit in the Trinidad and Tobago the Parliament and debate. Like it was, I think it was like 60 or 50 women in Parliament, like all women sitting, and that was amazing. But I have a question for you. And I'm sure you've been asked this a lot, I assume. But I'm so, excited to hear about this, right? So as the first Black woman elected to the Canadian House of Commons, I wonder what that experience meant to you, to your country, Canada, Grenada, your family, the people that you would have worked with and was surrounded by. What was that experience like?
Well, it was exhilarating. It was a time, the night of the coming in of all the votes, because again, when you get into a campaign, you don't know that you're going to win. You have, of course, pollsters that's giving you numbers, and a campaign team that's pushing you to go from door to door. And that was in, I keep saying, the olden days, 1992. When you had to go from door to door and knock, you had to stop people on the street and ask them, for their support. I learned a whole lot of stuff, how you come up in a cold way and say, hello, my name is Jean Augustine. I'm running as a member of Parliament for Etobicoke Lakeshore for the Liberal Party. I'd like your support. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, because Canada is not the kind of easy place where you come up to absolute strangers, and start talking to them. Right. But I did knock on thousands and thousands of doors, and I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people in order to get their support, because I was running against someone who was a leadership candidate for the Conservative Party, well known, well liked. And so I was taking down a giant, as it were.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the fact that I won, and I won by, I think, pretty close to 20,000 votes over that specific candidate, that inspired a whole lot of people. And so when I went to Ottawa, when I got to the House of Commons, I realized that I was here not only as Jean Augustine, but I was here as a symbol, as a representative of all of the people whose aspirations up to this point had not been filled. And I know, and I tell this story because the second day I was there, as we were opening the mail and everything else, there was a letter from someone all the way out from British Columbia, which is on the other side of the country. And it was from a man in prison, and he says, "Now that you're elected, get me out of here." So there was expectation. There was expectation that as an African Canadian woman, and as I identified myself as a Black woman, that every Black person felt that they had a say, that they had a conduit, that they had a way to reach out into a process that before that there was not a lot of interest.
Right.
And so "you can do it, yes, it can be done," was signals that went out throughout the country. In Grenada, they were very happy, my friends in Grenada. And of course, I never say anything without saying I am from Grenada. I came to Canada and the Canada Caribbean Domestic Scheme that allowed young Grenadians like myself the opportunity to get to Canada. And as the years went by, with the collaboration between Canada and the Caribbean, I was given a number of opportunities to be with the Caribbean Development Bank, to come down and do the exchanges between for pensions, Caribbean people getting their pensions to come to Canada, and people of Caribbean thing coming. So I went through most of the islands, signing those documents, and have had the opportunity to be appointed at hurricane time, to be the go-between, to make presentations, to get the monies and support for disasters in the Caribbean area. So I've always seen myself not so much placed as an African Canadian woman, because I also got a lot of opportunities to do things in Africa, but I saw myself very much a Grenadian, having the background, the resilience that I learned growing up in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada, the issue of support and the respect for policies, for elders, and all of those things that I'm sure that we learn in the Caribbean setting.
Yes, and that is a perfect, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of times, and I mean, it's a narrative that people usually say that once you've left the Caribbean, you kind of throw away the Caribbean, and so you never actually return to any schools of thought or any ideas about the Caribbean. And so I want to ask, what impact did following the women's movement in Grenada and the Caribbean more broadly, like it broadened your work in Canada? How did you merge or deal with any tensions between Caribbean feminisms and those of the global North in your social justice work?
Remember that I left Grenada in 1960.
Right.
I'm not too sure the word feminism was, and feminist thinking and all of this was around.
Yeah.
My recollections and my remembrances had to do with the fact that that young women were not as valued
Mhm.
as young men. The families, when I was growing up, in the 50s, 60s, were putting together envelopes to send their sons and daughters away to university because there was no post-secondary, around. UWI was just coming on the scene, and there was Teachers College in Trinidad and Teachers College in Barbados. But apart from that, on the island itself. And so I watched cousins and I watched friends going away, men, the boys, being sent away to school. There was no hope that as a girl that I would go, except I had a grandmother who, way before we knew the term feminist, I think she was a feminist. And she was also the one, way before Obama said that, she said, you can do it. You are a bright girl. That affirmation is so important to have from very early times, someone looking at your report cards, looking at your progress in school and saying, you can do great things, you can do it. And so when I thought about the way forward for me, it was to get an education, but having to go outside the island, because the opportunities available to me, having completed Oxford and Cambridge overseas school certificate, A-level, all of that, I had about 4 areas or avenues for employment. I could be a nurse, I could be a teacher, I could work in a department store, or I can have a baby or get married. And so those were the options for young people. And there weren't a lot of pushing towards, let's make this better for young women.
Right.
And so the role at the time, in terms of thinking about whatever feminist thinking there was in Grenada, I'm not too sure that was, we were proud later on when we had the first woman Governor General. And we were very pleased that some of the women who had gone away and had made some progress in different ways. But at the same time, there wasn't a kind of path, there wasn't a role, there wasn't a mentoring system, there wasn't anything that spoke to young women, you need to, young women, you can.
Right.
Because the women themselves were struggling within the families with men who were very conventional, who had specific roles, didn't come home after work, went to the pubs, didn't think they were pubs. But anyway, the men were really having a good time, and the women were supposed to look after the children, look after the household. And in my situation, what I saw around me were very strong women. I remember all the matriarchs, but I don't remember a lot of the men. And I know that they did all have husbands. I can reel off, the names of the women and what they were doing and how they were saving the money in the apron and under the pillow and always had a little bit of something to help someone else. Yeah. And so those were the examples of very strong women, matriarchs of family, encouraging and educating young people. And what I heard all the time is, go to school, you bright, you can do it, make us proud. Those words still resound with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can think, so we just completed our general elections here in Trinidad. And and Jamaica also concluded theirs. And there was a common thing that I witnessed, and something I really appreciated was seeing like a lot of young people and even like elders encourage young people to go out and vote, to be a part of this, election process. And leading up to that, at the national chapter, we got an interview on television, and we were talking about, the need for there to be like a gender quota to kind of encourage more women to be a part of, running for candidacy. So if parties had that gender quota, then they can, include more women in the process and even in parliament. And There was a comment that someone made in the national chapter was that, how can you put a woman to lead if she's not there to lead, as in she doesn't think that this is a space for her? And I realized that, growing up, and it's only if you are privileged enough to be in a space or have the family to encourage you, that's how you would know your true power. And so I'm wondering, what are some ways do you think we can assist women and girls in realizing that they too can lead?
Well, I think it's the realization that we have to have a place in the society, in every aspect of the society. And we have to be mentored. The history in Canada shows that women did not just get up and say we want to be voted in, or we want to be part of this. In the earlier times, most of the women who got into Parliament got there because they were the daughters of a parliamentarian who either passed away and they took over the constituency, or the wives of someone who. So it was a slow process getting women into the Parliament of Canada. The critical mass of women who got into the Parliament of Canada was in 1993, when I got in. The Liberal Party and the discussions prior to that led to the selection of, or the encouraging of women to participate, because again, a lot of the studies show that women have to be asked. Because women feel, oh, well, it's not a world for me. The way the media speaks about, about women, the reputation, the whatever else, and women kind of shy away from that. But by 1992, the discussion had been, and we had seen around the world, the Scandinavian and other experiences showed that when you had a critical mass of women in the legislature, and critical mass of women in any sphere, 30% was usually thrown out, that you made a big difference.
Yeah.
And that, so the arrival of that thinking by parties, political parties, spoke to the fact that they had to work at getting at least 30% or a fair number of women. And so the parties started to look for. And what happened in a number of instances, women were not placed in winnable ridings. Right?
Yes,
and that is, I was talking to one young woman who just ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada and did excellent. Right. And one of the things I said to her is, when you're ready to run, make sure that you get a winnable riding.
Yeah.
And even in my case, when I was running in '92, it was not a winnable riding. A lot of people didn't give me a lot of chances that did not predict that I would win, because I was going up against this giant of a man who was a lawyer, who had written constitutional documents, who had been a member for the last 2 or 3 electoral years, and who also ran for the leadership of the party and had national profile.
Yeah.
And so again, it's, where do we place women? How do we support them once they've said yes? Yeah. Because once I said yes to the party, I was more or less left on my own to do my fundraising and to bring around me all of the support that I would need to run a really good campaign. So those are things we have to think about. Yeah. How we get women, the number of the critical mass of women we need, and the difference. And once we get there as a critical mass, then what positions are you placed in when the Prime Minister and his team make the selection of who is going to be minister of this, minister of the other? And for the first number of years with women, we were not given the high profile portfolios. Yeah. And for the very first time now in Canada, we now have a woman finance minister, because it seemed as though finance and all those things, international trade and all of those were positions for men.
Yes, yes. You see a lot, like, you mentioned that, and I was having that conversation with someone, and I thought, I was like, I don't, because, okay, so the way that elections are in Trinidad, it's very like race oriented. And so the major political parties, they're both led by, so one is led by an Afro-Trini, the other is led by an Indo-Trinidadian. The Indo-Trinidadian is a woman and the Afro a man. And so a lot of times there are particular areas in Trinidad and Tobago that a particular race is quite dense. And so according to what race is dense in that area, the particular party that, respectively of that, they win. And I realized that parties already know who their strongholds are. They already know that they're going to win the seat, and it's proven all the time. I think this election, it was like, it lived
predictable.
Up to that. Yeah, it's very predictable, exactly. And like, I realized that women are always placed in the areas that, it's not guaranteed to win. And I wonder if that's a deliberate thing or if it just happens to be that. But I think now that, these conversations are happening and they have access to this knowledge, they can now properly ensure that women are placed in winnable constituencies, so that they can be a part of, the upper house. And then when they're in the upper house and you have to assign ministerial positions, that you give meaningful ones. Like, so this is the second time a woman is now the Minister of Education in Trinidad and Tobago. And the Prime Minister made this comment that he's putting, the nation's children in the hands of a mother, right? And I was wondering, like, and listen, the minister is brilliant, PhD, like everything. And you didn't even mention any of that, but the fact that, she's a mother. And like things like that, I think it really kind of reinforces, those traditional gender norms, and it kind of genders roles, right? And I find that to be so problematic. And I really hope that, in the future, the next elections, like throughout the Caribbean, throughout the world, that, these meaningful positions are given to women. Once, of course, they can do the work,
Well, I think it's important for us to recognize that we have to get away from this issue of gender and defining us by gender.
Yes.
He didn't say that past Minister of Education was in the hands of a man, of a father, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, again, you see, we're in this stage now where we are moving. It's kind of like a work in progress. We're moving towards understanding that we do need women. Then we're looking at the understanding that we have to have the gender-based analysis of all the things that we're doing, that we need to be inclusive, that we need to be diverse, and we need to watch, and this is a big discussion in Canada now, this pandemic time, the whole issue of systemic discrimination, what is built into the system and into the thinking and into the policies that somehow cause for this this lack of recognition of the skills and talents of so many people.
That's so I wrote a blog about that, and I said the same thing, like the Minister of National Security is a man. No one said that, oh, he's a great father, so this is why we're giving him it. No one ever says that, and it was just so maddening. Like, it was a great swearing in, but then hearing it, I'm like, why,
And this is why it's important for your organization and for us to be constantly pulling up these statements, so that people could begin to examine what it is they say and how loaded those things are, and what messages are conveyed to young people. And it's so, this is why, things like the Me Too and all of these movements have created that thinking. And we know now that it's kind of bringing to the fore, doing the research, showing the capabilities, ensuring that language is so important.
Yes. So very important. I think it can make, like, I don't think, people recognize, like, everything is really in the power of the tongue. Like, the kind of language that you use. Like, I try my best, at Civil, a lot of times they tell me, like, using violent language, because you know a lot of the language that can be used in many ways, it has a violent root. And I try my best to, you know, think about it. I try my best to not say guys to a room full of mixed persons.
Yes, yes.
You know, and to ensure that I don't reinforce stereotypes, because like it's like using that kind of language normalizes, you know, this kind of thinking, and it's really, really damaging. And I'm sure a lot of people think, oh my God, you're being too sensitive, or you're thinking about it too much. But honestly, it's really something that can change the way we see things, or it can just, you know, continue to let the thing fester. And so I'm wondering, what does a youth-friendly and gender-inclusive parliament look like to you?
Well, first of all, youth-friendly would involve having young people around, the mentoring, the giving them the opportunities. And I've done that for years. I've had busloads of kids come from Toronto to walk the halls of the Parliament of Canada, to say, this is your house, to have them go into the chamber where they could see the seats and oftentimes try out the seat. They want to sit in the Prime Minister's seat, or I used to be one of the speakers in the chair, the deputy speaker, and I said, sit in the chair, you know, you in the house, this is your house. So giving that opportunity, that it's not a mystic, magical place someplace out there, but it is a place to do the work of the people of Canada. The issue of mentoring, and I ask usually as many constituencies, as many MPs, get volunteers in their offices. When there is any work that needs to be done in the Parliament, look for a young person in their constituency who can make input. You can say, well, we're going to do this policy, or we're talking about implementing this, that, the other. What do you think? Can you get some of your colleagues, or in school, or your classmate, or your club, or whatever, to talk about this that's happening? So you show them how things are done. You have them volunteer. You make sure that whatever, and here in Canada, we now have young people that we put on school boards to be the youth voice on a school board, to make decisions, because the Board of Trustees are making decisions about what's happening in schools. And who better to make a bit of an input than a student? We also have to respect young people, so that we don't see them as whatever. We see them with opinions. We see them as having something to contribute to the discussion. A youth-friendly parliament, again, does all of these things, but at the same time, we have in our parliament a minister responsible for outreach and other things to young people. So that there is a minister responsible for youth and youth issues. And that minister involves, again, the young people, and coordinates and collaborate and be the voice for, and look for programs and whatever legislation is being passed, ensure that there is some kind of youth advocacy in that. So a youth-friendly parliament is one that I think that's the way we have to go. Because we use words like, the youth is our future, the young, but and then we leave them out. How can they be the future if we don't coach them, if we don't mentor them, if we don't allow them to collaborate, if we don't ask their opinion?
And it has to be asked in a really meaningful way, and meaning to listen, because recently, I got called upon as a key informant to contribute to the National Youth Policy. And I wondered to myself, are they going to use anything that I said? Like any of these suggestions? Or is this just a thing that you have to kind of check on a list, you know? And I mean, everyone that runs, I mean, the youngest senator, you have to be at least 25 years old to be able to run, or to be appointed senator or anything like that. But yeah, there aren't much people who are on that age in Parliament. So I wonder, what's the process, you know? But I'm hoping that this isn't something that's going to take forever to achieve. And I mean, I know everything, it requires steps and whatnot, but I think that even like older folks, like my mother, I know my mom would not vote for someone who is young because they would believe that they're not seasoned, they don't have the experience.
Yeah.
How can I put, my trust into someone who has never, been like around in that way? And I mean, in order to build experience, you have to be there, right? So you have to, trust them. And I really hope that we get there. But mentorship is so important. And that experience you mentioned, having the kids come to Parliament when ParlAmericas and Cyril had done that. Like, I sat in Parliament and I was like, wow, so I can actually be here one day. It was such an empowering experience. And it was live streamed to on the Parliament channel for like any other sitting.
Yes,
and it was I think that was very, very life-changing. And the room of women came from all sorts of backgrounds. Probably those who never even thought that they can even, I don't know, step foot next to the Parliament. And here we were, all dressed up in suits and stuff. And it was brilliant. And I think that is something that needs to happen often.
Well, there is an organization here called Equal Voice. And one of the things that they do is they have their session, and one day of that session is spent in the Parliament when they take on the role of their constituency representative, and they sit in their seat of their representative, and they carry on. But it's all done respectfully. It has to be done respectfully. Yeah. It's not just these young people are just coming, but it's doing all of the protocols and preparing everything respectfully as they would have for parliamentarians. It's also giving them a voice. It's bringing in the Prime Minister to speak to them and other ministers to speak with them and to carry on so they get a real experience. But apart from Equal Voice, where I think a lot of young women are being groomed, it's also the notion of getting young women involved in all the discussion around the vote. They have several different ways, and of course, there is one organization, just coming to the top of my head, it was called Rock the Vote. And so the young people were going around, rock the vote, getting people to get out there and vote, learning among themselves what the process and the procedures, and then offering their assistance to different constituencies in terms of how that organization can help to bring out the youth voices, to bring out the thing, because you can vote here age 18. And then starting right within the high school themselves, one of the interesting things that have happened when I was an educator in the classrooms, we used to have election in schools the day before the election, or the weekend before the election. And so they set themselves up and they vote for who's going to be the prime minister, the this, or that, the other. And so it was a good thing for them afterwards to look at the result of the vote and see the result of their voting. So again, it's the way we engage young people from a very, very early age and stage. I think you mentioned earlier that I have the Center for Young Women's Empowerment. And we start at age 7.
Yes.
Because I think it's important, if we are going to develop self-esteem, if we're going to develop leadership skills, if we're going to be helping our young people to find their places in careers and other things, you have to start early before they either get off the rail or before they fall off the rail. So it's very early. And one of the things, I'm not too sure what's going on in the Caribbean now, because I haven't really looked, but the education system, they're teaching civics. Their classes, the history classes and whatnot, because I'm a little ashamed to say that, but when I came through the entire elementary and high school system in Grenada, and I was never taught Caribbean history.
Yeah.
I knew all about the history of Britain. I can tell you all the kings and queens and the wars that were fought and what armadas were sunk and whatever. But I don't remember learning anything about, the history of the Caribbean. Yeah. and the Caribbean nations. And the other day I picked up a book and was reading about the Federation, what happened there and why that niche did not occur. Because right now from the outside, I keep thinking it would be such a great thing if we had this, but again, it's at my age, you can reminisce on those things. But again, I don't remember learning civics in that sense.
And it's not taught. I mean, only this year, the Prime Minister said to the Ministers of Education that, he hopes that the curriculum could be revamped in a way that includes civics. And so here we are in 2020, and this is now a thought. But even I did history for CSEC, the CXA examination. And the history was about not the Caribbean. I learned everything else, but about anything here. And I think that's like the major thing where we don't know about our history. We know up till the transatlantic slave trade, very, very, like not even extensively. I guess we might have to go do a degree to learn more. But I think in order for us to also, like it's a domino effect when I think about it, like for you to firstly be empowered and know the kind of power that you have to know your history. You have to know who you are. You can't, operate in a space where you don't know who you are. And two, some of the resources aren't like in your reach, is not accessible. I mean, if I have access to internet, I have a laptop, I could go research things, but there are young ones, especially in this pandemic, like where I work, and we work with students and youth development, there are like 40% of students who are completely unreachable, as in you can't even call them because they don't have phones, right? And how are they going to learn? How are they, like, it's so crazy, because how are they going to have access to this? It's not being taught in schools. They don't have access to internet, and so it's something that's scary. And I think hopefully that the curriculum is actually revamped across the Caribbean and the wider region in ways that it's inclusive of different cultures, of different, teachings, because we need to know,
And I think one of the things that the pandemic has opened up is that disparity between those who have access to the technology, and to give us some opportunities to rethink and also to see where we go in terms of ensuring that that young people have access. Because we're in a world now where technology is almost the way forward, and that we can't move forward unless we are literate in that sense.
What are the greatest needs for younger generations, as we're on this talking about the pandemic? What are the greatest needs that you think that younger generations need as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, again, what I was just saying, the fact that access to technology, access to all that there is in the society that they can garner through technology, I think that it's an awareness for those in leadership. To ensure this is how we'll spend our money. This is what is important, because we know that when parliaments and when governments see something as important, they spend the money on it. And let's find the resources to do this, to make sure that there is national Wi-Fi. One of the things in Canada that opened up this whole business, because we say, okay, everybody's now going to go on online education. And then we find out that there are some families that won't work. You have 5 children in the family and you have 1 laptop.
Right.
And the lessons are coming at whatever times, and how do you share that one? And the other is you're in an area where the wireless, where the Wi-Fi and other things are not available. And so what it did for us, and I can see this in Canada, it opened up that disparity. And in a number of instances, the government reached forward and had some programs where you get access to laptop. And one of the things, the center that I run, we made sure that every young person, through the generosity and funding and government sources, etc., had the ability to get access and to get the resources that's needed so they could get online on that online train to for their education.
Right.
But again, those are things that need to be examined. And I'm hoping that this pandemic also gave you an opportunity, or gave the Caribbean an opportunity to do the data collection of what the needs are, what were exposed, as it were, in this pandemic. Because here we're doing a lot of that. It exposed the whole issue of those who were working at minimum wage, those who had no wages, the employment issue, disparities, housing, a whole series of things got opened up. It was almost like it was like an egg, everything contained in there, and all of a sudden the pandemic came and it opened up, and we saw all of these things in Canadian society. We were fortunate that we had a government that jumped in with grants and funding and loan programs and wage support, and a whole series of things were put in place. But again, we have the resources to do that, although we have a lot of voices that are saying, oh, you're working up so much debt, when we spend all of this, how are we going to recover? And what are we going to leave for the next generation? We're going to leave them with debt, etc., etc. But the general thinking is we have to help people right now, because as things have opened up and we see the disparity, let's see what we can do right now.
Yeah. And I would like to say that that's something that we're doing. I mean, we've seen like even domestic violence cases and femicides, like, it's at an all-time high here in Trinidad. And even, so we got an influx of Venezuelan migrants within the last 2 years or so. And even we have more migrants, like even during the pandemic, we got more. And there were, I think it's 484 reports, during the pandemic of Venezuelan migrants who were assaulted, like cases of sexual abuse and whatnot. And it's something that I'm sure would have happened before, but now, because of the pandemic, it's all piled together, and it's even worse than before. And I mean, before the pandemic, we would have set up the gender-based violence unit here in Trinidad. But I don't think, or at least from looking on, that they have actually been sensitized, that they know how to deal with the stuff, to prevent it, or to deal, because like there were a couple of femicides, and the reports all said that they went for assistance and got none, right? And so I'm hoping that, because our budget is on the 5th of October, and I really hope that there is, like, money is allocated in a way that can probably reduce these numbers, or tend to it in a way that's meaningful, because it's a very scary thing. There are over 60,000 students who don't have access to digital devices, and some of them are, writing CAPE examinations, A-levels, and also CSEC for O-levels. And so I conducted a focus group last week with some students, boys, and they are all there. They were young, 13, 15 years old. And they don't even feel, optimistic about the future, because they said, what is the future? Like, we have COVID-19. And, like, understanding, like, different parts of the world, what not having access to education means. Like, I learned that based in Africa, because there's no idea of what's going to happen because of the pandemic, the girls are being married off.
Yes.
Right? And I am like, it was so heartbreaking because this pandemic has just, I mean, it's doing a lot, and it's you know, kind of throwing people into live on earth hell, you know, for lack of a better term. And it's, I hope, and I mean, I know that like some governments don't have the tools and the resources to ensure that people are taken care of. So I hope that, you know, fellow citizens can reach out, even if it's one person.
If truth be told, we have the same story here, the level of violence, the level of, because people are confined into small quarters to a certain extent, you know, basement apartments, small houses with partners who were abusive in the first place, but now that he is there every minute of the day, you know, we see a lot of those things happening. At the same time, I am a board member of an international organization called A Beautiful World. And we support young women to go to, in Africa, in a few of the countries in Africa, to go to high school, and then we support them on to university. And what has been happening, because we don't have the funding now, because funding sources are cut down in all kinds of economic situations have occurred for people, we're not able, in some instances, to send the funding, because the funding enabled the girls to pay their tuition, to get, you know, monies for, you know, their needs and whatever else. And so we're not sending that to them. We are hearing that a number of them, the families, are marrying them off. You know, so the same situation that, and a number of the girls are writing to say, please, you know, and what choices do they have when they see the family situation? And here they come home from the university or from whatever institution they were in, and to find that the family does not have enough to sustain them. And so the answer is so and so, and usually they're older men. They married off to these two. So again, it's something that has affected us. This pandemic has affected the world, has affected our programs, and at the same time, I am saying that it has opened up those issues that we need to focus on and to find answers to.
Do you think there are any ideological divides, or if you think that there are, between generations, you know, working towards social equality?
Well, there is always there is always a divide, and there is always a whatnot. If you are as old as I am, you get impatient with systems. You want things to work as of yesterday. At the same time, there would be people in the older generation that would wonder whether the young people should wait and hold back and wait their time and whatever else, because in their time it took X number of, you know, for things to happen. And there is the impatience of the youth, and it is rightfully so. There are so many social movements that are giving affirmation to where we need to go. But then, of course, I mentioned the word systemic earlier. There are lots of things that are in the system that's built in there, and it's going to take a while to entangle or disentangle some of those policies, and so that we can move forward. So there is always that push and pull. Let's move forward. It's important to move forward, but at the same time, how do we? What's the disruptors in here? What are we disrupting as we move, as we march forward? And so it's important for the generations, and to have intergenerational conversations. I've been in several intergenerational conversations, and you know, you start off, at least I usually start off with the way it was, you know, and where we are now, and why we need to push forward, so that the young people don't think that what they're putting forward has never been touched before, has
Right.
never been spoken about before. Yes, that was spoken about, so and so, we didn't make the progress we should. But here we are, and this is where we need to go now. And
Yeah.
who are our allies? Because it's important to have allies.
Yeah.
And especially in our in the situation where I deal with a lot of Black community and Black community organizing, we have to find those organizations and corporate bodies with monies and who can offer support, who can be our allies to help us to
Right.
advance the conversation.
Yeah. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I think an important thing, like, okay, so having advisors, folks who would have already done this kind of work, who are currently doing this kind of work, to, you know, kind of set you on the path or give you advice as to here's what you can pull on. And I think that would always work better when you can reference something that was already done. And so, for example, in Trinidad, and I'm referencing Trinidad a lot because, you know, I live here and it's easy to pull on. But we had a gender policy that is still in its draft for years, you know, and it'll be crazy for someone to pop up and say, hey, let's have a gender policy when there's already one in the works. So what will be good is to say, hey, there's this gender policy that's in draft. Can we work on this and see how it can be revamped, of course, to suit current times and to ensure that everyone's included. And I think that can only do good.
Yes,
for the nation,
yes.
You know, and it includes everyone in the conversation. It doesn't exclude anyone. You know, I think every voice, regardless, old, young, whatever, it's necessary because this country, the world is for us and we're still alive, you know, here living in it. And so I think that intergenerational conversation must happen. It's the best way to bridge the gap, you know, teaching and learning. And there's so much things that we as young people can learn from persons who have done it before. And it will only result in good, you know, it doesn't harm, you know, anyone, I believe, or it should not, at least, you know, harm, right?
Well, the issue of elders is something that I think it's in the Caribbean setting, need to be, what should I say, examined. Because I think we don't look to the elders to help us make good decisions. Right. And somehow we think that the decision of today is really it. But as you were saying, if we look back and we see what was done, what was struck, what we can do, how we can make it, how we can update and make this better, and we use the wisdom of the elders. I think that too often, I see this in the Caribbean setting, that people are put to the side, you know, foolish old lady.
You're very right. You're so right. I see it a lot, like people who hate older Caribbean feminists because, and I'm like, it's only good to come out of leaning on them, have them as your mentors, let them talk to you, learn something, you know, because they know. And like there's Hazel Brown, who is amazing, like listening to her story and, you know, all of the things that she would have experienced and gone through with the Black Power movement and everything. And you can only learn resilience and strength and that kind of hard work and sacrifice and dedication, like all of these traits that's, you know, very important as being a great leader. And I don't think you can lead effectively if you refuse to honor your past and honor those pillars you really stand on, because they paved the way, you know? Like we would have had all of these opportunities if they weren't there and doing that kind of work. How do you think youth-led initiatives and organizations can be consulted in meaningful ways? And I know we touched on that earlier, but do you think that is something that should be done, and how can it be done?
Well, I think it's important to involve the youth. We're in 2020 now, and we've gone through all the experiences, and we realize how important it is to have the youth voices. And we see that we make different policies and more affirming policies when we include the youth voices. It's the same thing we can say about women's voices, that for a long time, a lot of the governments were all male. For a long time, the electoral process involved who owned lands and therefore who can vote, and they were all male. We know now that things have changed, times have changed. Women now can go to the bank and get a loan without having their husband be coming to be signatory. So we've moved forward, and so it's important for us to see that the youth coming along need to be included in all of this, and it's included and have their voices part of whatever it is that we're doing. I mean, the issue around reproductive health, the issue around all of these gender issues that face us. There was a time when I was growing up, there were name calling people who were gay or lesbian or homosexual. When I think about that, when I was growing up, it was just those names, that abusive names that were used. We know now that we've changed the discussion. We know now that we have people who are willing to explain, to come out, to be part of, to make their contribution, to be part of the society and the moving forward of the society. So we always have to work at how we can have diverse voices, diverse groups, and the youth has to be part of that, because it is the youth that we're making those policies for and who would help us to make those policies going forward.
Yes. Thank you so much. Last thing I want to ask, and I think I'm asking it for me, I'm asking for anyone who will watch this, advice for someone who wants to lead or feel as though they're too different to lead and to be in positions of decision making. What's your advice to them?
I usually say, you never choose. Someone said a long time ago, if you think you're too small to make a difference, have you ever shared your bed with a mosquito? The mosquito makes a big difference to your entire night. I think every one of us has something to contribute. I think very early, and this is where we start early with our young people in the homes, within the families, to encourage our young people, to encourage, especially the girls, to be able to express their views. No view is a silly view or a stupid view. It's just another perspective. And that we as adults or as parents or whatnot could help to shape the view in such a way that it is clear and understandable. I think it's important for a young person to know that if you are going to, and this is why we can't present models that sometimes I say to young people, well, don't look, I have been the first Black woman to chair a meeting in Paris for the OECD. I was the first whatever way. It's kind of sometimes too far, too far removed from where they are. So I think one has to begin to say, you can do it. And so we start with education. We start with including them. We start with giving responsibilities. We start with providing. And one of the things I saw happening very well, I think it happens in the Caribbean too, is using the creative arts, the skits, the drawings, the whatever else to show that kind of inclusion and awareness, and also saying you have a voice, use it. Not everybody's going to want to get into politics per se, big P politics, but everything we do in life is political, and we have to be able to express our views. We have to be able to identify those who are, whose views match ours and why we need to support them. We need to know where this society and how the society is moving. And we need to know that we have to be a contributor, because this business of let them do it, let them whatever, I don't think that is the way that we have. We all have to get engaged and involved. And I think that's what That's what the conversation is all about. That's civic engagement.
Yeah.
The fact that every one of us has to be engaged with the society, with what's happening in the society. The fact that we're all here. I think there was, I just lost her name, who said, you look around, there are what, 7 point something billion of us in the world, and we're all taking up space. We're all breathing the air. We all enjoying whatever that there is on this. What is your contribution to the space that you're taking up?
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Augustine. I think this made my day, my month. Thank you so much for sharing, for being willing to have this conversation with me, for being so open and honest. You know, we had such an insightful and rich conversation speaking about COVID-19, how youth can be empowered, how women can be empowered. And I think that anyone that listens to this will get some sort of something to ensure that they make a difference and they contribute to the little space that they exist in. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And all the very best. And to ParlAmericas, continue to do the good work and continue to do the networking. Because again, it's the global village that we're in, right? We're all in this global village.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.